I'm going to talk now about a common scenario. Client comes to the office. They entered the country through Mexico, means they were not inspected at the border. They didn't have a visa. They snuck into the country illegally. They're now contemplating or are married to a U.S. citizen. They want to know if they can get their papers done. The answer is yes. There is an extra step. You have to file the I-130, which is to prove that it's a legitimate bona fide marriage, that it's not done just for papers. That's the part where they show joint leases, joint bank accounts to show that it's a real marriage. Now, the United States is very, very big on entering the country legally. It means being inspected and allowed into the country. There are only certain circumstances where you don't need to leave the country and enter correctly. A U visa, for example, you don't need to leave the country. Most times you need to leave the country and enter legally. Now, the problem is, if you've been in the United States for over 6 months, you've accumulated what's called unlawful presence. So, most people have over a year of unlawful presence. Now that unlawful presence, if you travel back to your home country, the minute that you leave the United States and you have over a year of unlawful presence, you're banned for 10 years from coming back in. It means you can't make an application to come back for 10 years. There is a waiver for that, or a pardon. That's called a 601A waiver. 601A only forgives unlawful presence. So if you have a drug conviction, or you have some other issue, medical issue, or some other issue that's going to keep you out of the country, the 601A does not cover that. It only covers unlawful presence. But, assuming there are no other issues, client comes in, he snuck in through Mexico, he's now married to a U.S. citizen. Can we get him his green card? The answer is yes. I-130, prove it's a real marriage. Once that I-130 gets approved, you have to do a 601A waiver for unlawful presence. The key to the 601A unlawful presence waiver is an extreme and unusual hardship on the U.S. citizen's spouse. So, you need to prove that if you were removed to Brazil, for example, your spouse has two options, right? Either that your spouse goes with you to Brazil or stays here without you. Right? So in those two scenarios, you have to show it's an extreme hardship on the U.S. citizen. Right? That is the 601, the basis of the 601. A lot of times people go to see a psychologist and they talk to the psychologist about the separation issues they would have, the financial issues that would, you don't talk to the psychologist about that, but financial issues. Maybe the U.S. citizen spouse doesn't speak Portuguese, and if they went to Brazil, they wouldn't be able to work because they don't speak the language. If the U.S. citizen went to Brazil, maybe they would be subjected to a lesser medical standard. They wouldn't have as good of hospitals. They wouldn't have good of education, things like that. If you can prove that it would be an extreme hardship on a U.S. citizen spouse, the U.S. immigration will grant you a 601A unlawful presence waiver. Then what happens? Well, you have a piece of paper that says that you have the waiver. You file the DS-260. You'll have an interview in Rio de Janeiro. You fly to Rio de Janeiro. Client does. As soon as he steps foot in Brazil, he has a 10-year ban before he can come back in, but he has the waiver. He has an appointment at the U.S. consul in Rio de Janeiro. He shows up. They look over his application. No medical issues, no criminal issues, no other terrorist issues, nothing like that. His only problem was that he snuck in illegally and stayed there for over a year, but he has a pardon for that. He gets it approved, he flies back to the United States, and he's now a green card holder, lawful permanent resident. He needs to stay a lawful permanent resident for 3 years before he can naturalize. Once he naturalizes, it's as if he was born in the United States. He's a U.S. citizen that they can no longer deport.